it's a good microphone, so it should pick up fine. But yeah, if you could just give me a history of like Scratch and how things got started with it and how the idea came about.
Well, I sort of co-founded Fruit in 2010, and it became a home for my theatre company, Ensemble 52. We started with a couple of our productions there, and then I knew Dave from way back, and Dave Windass, and he had suggested the concept of doing a Scratch night. And a Scratch night basically sort of they started in London in places like the Battersea Arts Centre, and they're just tools for writers to try out little bits of new work, and they're put together very rough and ready, but they allow a writer to hear the words off the page and to trial out sort of 10 or 15 minutes of a piece. And so I liked the idea of that, so I suggested to Dave that we sort of do it under the company umbrella, and that Ensemble 52 sponsor them. And we started at the beginning of 2011, and they proved so successful that we've been doing them every 2 months since then. And you'd have to ask Dave about the statistics in terms of how many new writers, but it's a lot. I mean, we worked with something like 40 new writers and 80 new plays or something in that time, and they proved very useful. And the great thing is we tend to sort of keep our hands off them. The idea is to empower the writer into a sort of producer's role as well. So we say, well, we'll provide the venue, we'll introduce it, we'll put lights on you, but other than that, it's up to you to sort of find actors, I mean, we will try and help out if they get really stuck, we'll try and find actors for them or anything they need, but generally, they're pretty good, they find their own actors, it's all book in hand, so no one learns anything, it's all, again, quite rough and ready, people hold the scripts, read from the scripts, and just get an idea, and I think for the writers it's proved a really useful experience, to sort of help them go on to develop either more of a particular work or decide that doesn't work at all and go back to the drawing board.
That's great. And so do they use these as a way to test chunks of their work out, or do they start writing a full play and then pick a small chunk out to test the audience's reaction, or do they have an idea?
I think it varies. I mean, we sort of started, when we started them, Dave was theming them, so we would have on a particular subject, so I think after the riots last year there was I can't remember what the actual brief was, but there was a subject. What we found was that people started writing 10 or 15 minutes to a brief, so you were sort of getting complete little plays, short plays, which that's fine. Again, Scratch can be literally anything. It doesn't. I mean, that's the beauty of it. You don't say it is this or that. It can be anything. But I think we felt that actually what we preferred to do was to help people, to develop the whole sort of full length play. So some of them come as sections of a play that's already been written. Some of it arrives as 15 minutes of an idea that they want to continue into writing something, and some of it turns in as a complete entity, 15 minutes in and of itself. So we've had all the different sort of setups as far as that goes, and I think it's been quite nice. Like I say, when you don't prescribe, when you don't sort of say it has to be one thing or the other, you're often quite pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, I would imagine you get some quite interesting ideas if they're given a short space of time, if they wanted to write something for a 10-minute piece, 10 minutes of time.
Yes, I mean it's sort of it's kind of different discipline as well, because to write a short play or to try and get everything in that you want to say in 10 minutes is a very different discipline to sort of presenting 10 minutes of something that is maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours long. So I think that it's nice to have had both those sort of sets of ideas coming through, and of course the sort of the standard of the work has been really variable, right from completely way out there sort of pieces. Obviously, some people who I'm surprised could lift a pen, let alone write, and probably should only be let near crayons, but right up to things that have been startlingly good, and that's again, that's the great thing of having a kind of open door policy again, because we were sort of, when we started, we were a little bit more sort of well, we'll read them and we'll choose and we'll select the ones that we, and then we just sort of started to allow it to kind of happen a bit more organically, and again, you know, that's sort of what we've done with this one.
Great. Right. You've done very well because you've answered most of my questions already. But so where does it sit within theatre as a whole, sort of, compared to, no, you've answered that, sorry.
I can go on, I can sort of talk about that because, well, what it does, I mean, it's an interesting concept, Scratch, because it's very difficult for writers to get their work produced. And I think, as a director myself, one of the most difficult things is that, you know, I regularly receive maybe 2, 3, 4 full-length scripts every week from writers who want me to stage their
production, yeah.
Their production. And of course, it's just not, it doesn't happen, mainly because I can't actually read, because, you know, it takes a good hour and a half to read a script, so you can't read 4 scripts a week, you know, it's just impossible. So what it does serve as is a nice sort of thing to actually sort of see whether people have got something about them, you know, you can sort of, and if they do, then you can sort of suggest, well, maybe you might want to send me a little bit more, or you might want to try and develop this into a sort of 20-minute piece. And I think that's where we're going next with it, is to try and maybe go back through the ones we've done and some new ones and sort of say, right, instead of 10, 15 minutes, we'd like you to maybe do half an hour, a bit more, and have fewer on the evening, but make them slightly longer. So
do you find that some of the writers and they're using it as a means to advertise or to show potential funders or people, directors like you, producers, what they can do?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, obviously, I think that people do that. Some people do it more cynically than others. I mean, you know, but it's the whole thing. You know, if you see something that is amazingly good, then, you know, you're going to want to find out more about the person who did it and possibly about the piece itself. So I think, yeah, some people will enter it with that in mind. Others are more sort of at the beginning of their kind of writing experience, where they're just happy to get things on, and just the experience of sort of getting something together is enough for them. It's a slightly different Scratch this time, obviously, because we're doing a musical theatre based one. But generally, that's what's happened so far. That we've had, you know, people who've never written anything before, right up to people who are quite experienced writers, trying it out. So that's where you get this variety of quality and stuff. Although sometimes the people who are less experienced sometimes produce great things, and often the very good writers produce rubbish. So I mean, it's not a case that you know, it's always the better, you know, the more experienced writers produce great stuff and the novices don't, and it can always be surprising.
Yeah. Do you find the younger and less experienced writers come in to you and Dave for help? And you mentioned that you do help them with getting actors and things like that. Do you give them any other, so like, do you tutor them in writing or anything after you've seen, or do they come to you and say, you know, how did it go? What could I have done better? Do they come to you for feedback, or?
Well, the whole part of the thing of the evening is that it is also a chance for the audience to feedback. It's very much the audience gets to feedback about what they think about the pieces as well. It's a very democratic process. You know, you ask everybody to, which is not always good, because most often you get comments like the chairs are a bit uncomfort. You know, you go, well, it doesn't really, you know, say much about the piece, does it? Or,
no.
You know, music was too loud. That's always, you know, when you ask for comments, generally you get a lot of comments like that. But when you're talking about the pieces, it is good, because, you know, obviously you get general feedback from the audience. We leave out sheets at the end, and we will always give considered feedback if people ask for it. You know, it's you know, often you can do it on the night by having a quick chat, but if somebody wants a more considered response, then, you know, we're both more than happy to sort of try and lead them positively where we feel they should be going next.
Oh, that's really good. Can you tell me a little bit about the pieces that are on this year? This year,
This
sorry,
one,
this
on,
one,
on
sorry.
Tuesday.
Yeah, sorry.
I'm going to do all the ones this year.
Yeah.
I think it's be quite a lot. But well, yeah, we sort of do it from. It's a rather unusual one. This one. It's a sort of one-off, because having done over a year of Scratch now, I thought it might be quite an interesting idea to try what was loosely termed a sort of music theatre version, which was, instead of just having 10 or 15 minutes of a new play or piece, was to have 10 or 15 minutes of a musical theatre project or a music theatre project. So you'd have a song and some dialogue that either connected the song or was part of the show, which is kind of unusual because fewer people do it. You know, I mean, because obviously it requires more. You need a composer. You need, or at least somebody who's adapting music. So I think we've got. Again, I haven't sort of looked. I don't like to look too carefully at what's coming because I quite enjoy it on the evening just to see what happens on stage. But I know we've got a variety of different sort of sounds. We've got, you know, sort of somebody who's done a more jukeboxy style musical stuff, which so is songs that already exist. There are several which are completely from scratch, new works. There are ones that are more what I call musical theatre based. You know, that kind of sort of Andrew Lloyd Webbery sound, and some which are more sort of just plays with music or songs in them. So, you know, we're hoping sort of. I think we've got about 8 this time round, and there was a good take. Because I mean, it was a bit of an experiment to sort of see whether anybody out there was writing new musicals. But you know, we've had a fair take up, and I think we've got it down to about 8. So we'll see what it's all like, really.
With the this being like a musical themed, I'm not really sure, but you've obviously got musical theatre. Are you looking to do any other types of theatre that's different? Yeah, different themes.
I mean, it hasn't presented to myself. I mean, the musical theatre one came to me because I have a background. I've directed quite a lot of musicals, and so it's a sort of world that I quite enjoy. It's not a world I don't think Dave enjoys very much, but he obviously just hasn't seen the right musicals.
Yeah,
that's the thing. You were either brought up on kind of Jim Kelly or you weren't, and I think it's sort of. So I was quite interested to sort of, and actually I've written 2 musicals, and one of the pieces is mine. I mean, just a song from a show I wrote 10 years ago, but. So yeah, I think that is more obvious because it's a very distinct style of theatre. In terms of other stuff, I'm not sure. Yeah, I mean, because like I say, sometimes we have themed them, but I mean, you couldn't, for instance. Well, I suppose you could. I mean, you could sort of do a complete night of physical theatre, but I haven't sort of. Again, I don't know whether there's enough people working in the area in that kind of medium to warrant it. We just have a lot of people cycling around tangerines all night, sort of. I don't know. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, there's no reason why not. And if I felt that there was, or Dave felt that there was enough people behind a particular style of any one type of theatre. But I mean, again, it's nice, I mean, I think that because it's sort of always evolving and we can sort of make it what we want, then you can have a movie. I don't think we've done it yet, but we could have a complete night of comedy, for instance. You could sort of just do theme it night and have a comedy night, or the reverse, and have a darker sort of look. So I think again, this will be the way they'll go, and as and when these sort of ideas take us, we'll probably do them.
Yeah,
and see what the uptake is.
With each event, do you have a set group of people that approach you and say, we've got this piece we want to put on, and do you then have to say, well, you'll have to wait till the next event because we've got a full. Do you have is 8 your maximum, or
we found. I mean, Dave has sort of done more. 8 is about the right number because generally that means you can sort of do 4-ish an hour and be a couple of hours long. We have had times when Dave's pushed out. We had one that just seemed to go on for days, and it was because people. It got to the point at one point in the middle of the year where I started bringing an air horn in because you sort of say to people, right, do 10 minutes, and after 25 minutes people are still going, And so I said, right, if that happens again, literally. They've been told they're doing 10 minutes. At 15 minutes they're going to get a traffic light, and at 20 minutes they're going to get horned off. Literally. Which kind of frightened them a bit, I think. So that they have been tighter since then. But and I think he put 11 pieces that night, and it went on for forever. But So we sort of learned from that. So we try and keep them a bit shorter and sharper. But I mean, yeah, back to the question. There are and there are always people who sort of who are incredibly prolific writers who tend to sort of come up with something for every event. So you have to go, right, do you know what, you can't do this one. Maybe in 3 scratches time you can come back and do another one, but we can't do you every single time. And yeah, we just sort of, I mean, like I said at the beginning, it was more on which ones we felt were stronger when we got a lot of submissions. And now what we do, we just seem to sort of take them and put them through, and it's sort of first come, first served basis, and then we just roll them into the next one.
Yeah.
If they don't get seen, you know, for that particular one. And so far, it's kind of balanced out. We haven't had a massive backlog. It just seems to work quite nicely, really. Except for the one when we did it, like I say, we did Banging 11 to try and get through alone. That was just a mistake. So I think if that happened again, we'd just do another night. You know, we just do a
split the events.
Well, yeah, because we started out doing it. I think we were first of all we were going to do 2 a year, and that was the plan. And then because they were so popular, we sort of went to 4 times a year, and now we're sort of doing them every couple of months. So it's because there is the demand. And,
it's obviously building momentum. Yeah.
And it always gets an audience, so it's kind of that's the other nice thing, you know.
So talking about having 8 groups of people there, writers, there, actors. How do you manage all these people? Wondering about trying to. I've seen today that Dave's posted. Can you please put a time for when you want to do your rehearsal? I'm just thinking it must be chaos.
It is chaos. It's chaos, and I think that at the beginning, you know, it was incredibly chaotic, and we were all panicked all the time, because often you'd find that, you know, you wouldn't be able to get in until that's what we did one on a Sunday. I mean, we've now got this regular Tuesday slot, which works quite nicely because although people often have to take a day off work or something if they're working to come and do it, but we did one on a Sunday and turned up and then had a marketing that day, and they weren't clearing down until sort of 6, and so it was like, right, well, we've got, you know, you're not going to get any rehearsal, and you're going to have to do it, you're going to have to turn it around in half an hour. So we sort of learned from that, and then we had to cancel one because it was the snow last year, which was, we were under about 4 foot of snow. We'd had some people who braved it across from Bradford, which was really real shame, and we just had to cancel because it was just too snowy. But yeah, and now I think now we know that, well, we get in at about sort of 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and the thing happens at 7. We give people sort of half an hour on the stage, and actually, the more relaxed you are about it, then people tend to sort of organise themselves quite well, and of course they can go off into other parts of the building and rehearse and run lines and whatever. And of course, it's not meant to be polished. You know, the thing is, you're not allowed too much set or scenery. You know, you maybe have a table and chairs or a crate or something, and that's pretty much it. So, yeah, the idea is really to hear the words, is not to get bogged down with you know, too much other stuff. And the ones that have sort of failed often have, because they've tried to do too much. You know, they've had too many props, and they're trying to balance out reading a script while you're trying to eat a 3-course dinner or whatever, you know, and it's just it don't work, you know. You just got to cut through all that and just concentrate on what the thing's about.
Great. I think you've covered just about everything for me at the moment. Anything else you want to add in there?
I don't think so. I mean, that's pretty much the overview. I'm speaking to somebody it'd be quite interesting. I'm speaking to somebody from the Battersea Arts Centre, where Scratch sort of originated. One of the places about the possibility of doing a hookup with London, maybe beginning of next year, which would be quite nice. I'm going to talk to her next week. I mean, you know, they're sort of we've yet to kind of bring on something to a complete play. You know, I haven't actually taken anything, and although we did do one piece which has now been accepted into the 24/7 festival in Manchester, which is going to be this summer. So that'll be worked up into a sort of fuller piece, which is quite nice. So because that's the idea. I mean, the success of anything is judged by, you know, if there's an afterlife for any of these things, you know. But more than that, I mean, it's kind of what's nice is it's built up a community as well. You know, what you've got is a bunch of people who now sort of regularly come to them, and they're very supportive. Even I mean, I'm often I'm kind of quite critical, and I look at it from a sort of at the point of view of whether it could be developed or whether it's what sort of legs it's got. But the audience are really nice because they're very supportive, and even if something is a bit long or not terribly good, they'll still be positive,
supportive of it. Yeah,
they'll give it a good clap, and they'll sit and they'll listen, and that's really good, and it gives a lot of people confidence, particularly the people who aren't necessarily used to doing it, and so you create a sort of a kind of community, and some of them have gone on to do sort of other little projects at Whole Truck, and other sort of theatres in the area. So one of the ones we previewed here got a commission, which is going to be part of a thing called Theatre Brothel at Whole Truck, which will be good later in the year. So it's nice that this sort of out of this community, and then also that they support. So when we do a major production or we do one of our bigger productions, you hope that then becomes your audience, and they come back and see it as well, and tell their friends to come. So you're just trying to build a bit more of a scene in the whole, really, because it's sort of it needs it, it needs.
Yeah, I mean, Fruit seems to be really good at. I mean, they've got something on just about every night, and they're pushing a lot of the art side, aren't they, around that area, which I think is really, really good.
Well, it was. I mean, I think because when we first started it, obviously Dave, who operates it, runs the Welly, and so his sort of expertise was in music and club culture, and then mine was sort of in music within theatre and comedy. So it was a case of sort of picking each other's brains, and Dave's very good at programming the music and stuff, and now they've got quite a nice sort of cult cinema thing going on the Sunday nights, which is really developed with sort of kind of quiz beforehand and whatnot, and we do the markets there, and so I think because it's sort of it's quite an eclectic mix of different things, and also you can't really put your finger on the audience. It's had a real diverse sort of kind of audience as well. It's not just for the sort of uber hip kind of younger people. I mean, for the shows I've had, we've had everything from young kids who've never been to theatre before, right way through to sort of seasoned elderly sort of theatre goers who come in and put their thick coats on in the winter and sit shivering watching a play, which is lovely, and likewise for all the other events, you get a completely different crowd for a sort of Def Leppard tribute band as you do to sort of I don't know, a comedy night. So it's nice that it's a real variety, but I think it's partly the venue, because it's got such a good atmosphere, the venue, and we sort of realised this pretty quickly off the mark when we first opened it, because we were going to sort of tart it up a bit more as well, and we kind of opened it rough and said, well, let's just do it, and then we'll skim the floor, and then we'll paint the woodwork, and we'll make it all nice after the summer. And when we had the first sort of couple of nights, we said, well, let's just leave it like this.
Yeah,
that's what it's
really
about.
To it, yeah.
It's unconstructed. It's just it is what it is, and because of that, you can sort of pretty much do anything inside it, and get away with it. So it's nice, and it's really, and all we need is a few more things down there now, because the galleries have sort of sprung up and whatnot. We just need a few more sort of businesses and opportunities for people. I think the area will be really buzzing. It'll be really good.
Yeah, great stuff. Well, thank you very much for answering my questions and sort of covering just about everything.
Well, like I say, I'm